"Officer, he's trespassing on our retail business," screamed the CEO. The policeman looked at my master lease and replied, "Actually, sir, you're the ones trespassing." The cold Chicago wind whipped off Lake Michigan, but the sweat beads forming on Bradley Thorne's forehead had nothing to do with the weather. He was screaming at two private security guards who stood like brick walls in front of the glass doors of our Michigan Avenue flagship store. Behind them, a crew of locksmiths was already changing the commercial-grade cylinders. Victor Thorne, our CEO, was red-faced, screaming into his phone, demanding that the police arrest me for commercial trespassing. I stood on the sidewalk, holding a steaming cup of black coffee, watching the empire they thought they owned crumble in real time. But to understand how we got to this sidewalk on Michigan Avenue, we have to go back 12 years, to the fall of 2014. Back then, Vanguard Retail Group wasn't the $85 million apparel empire it is today. We were a mid-tier brand fighting for survival, desperately trying to break into the high-end retail space. The board of directors and our CEO, Victor Thorne, had their eyes set on the Holy Grail, a prime 9,000-square-foot storefront on Chicago's Michigan Avenue. It was the landmark location that could put Vanguard on the national map. The problem was the landlord. Chicago Landmark Properties wasn't interested in renting to a company with volatile cash flows and a weak balance sheet. I was brought in as Vanguard's director of real estate. I had a solid reputation in the commercial leasing world, but more importantly, I had a unique asset. My grandfather had passed away the year before, leaving me with a small but highly valuable real estate portfolio and a well-funded asset holding company named Vance Properties LLC. When negotiations for the Michigan Avenue site hit a dead end, Victor Thorne called me into his office. He was desperate. The building's landlord, managed by a sharp, no-nonsense director named Olivia Mercer, demanded either a $5 million personal guarantee or a massive institutional letter of credit that Vanguard simply couldn't secure. The deal was dead. That was when I proposed a solution. I went to Olivia Mercer, whom I had known professionally for a decade, and negotiated a master lease. Under the terms, Vance Properties LLC would lease the Michigan Avenue flagship directly from Chicago Landmark Properties, backed by my personal guarantee and my holding company's assets. I would then sublease the space to Vanguard Retail Group. Victor was ecstatic. He agreed to a monthly sublease rent of $85,000. I kept the markup clean and fair, just $5,000 over the $80,000 master lease rent I paid to Olivia. I wasn't trying to exploit Vanguard. I wanted the company to succeed because my compensation package included a base salary and a performance bonus tied directly to our real estate portfolio's growth. However, I wasn't naive. I knew the retail industry was cutthroat and corporate loyalty was a myth. Before I signed the master lease, I had my corporate attorneys draft an ironclad sublease agreement between Vance Properties LLC and Vanguard Retail Group. We inserted a specific non-negotiable clause, Section 14.4, titled Employment-Linked Tenancy. The clause was simple but lethal. It stated that Vanguard's right to occupy and sublease the Michigan Avenue property was strictly contingent upon my active employment as the director of real estate at Vanguard. If my employment was terminated for any reason other than documented cause, the sublease agreement would automatically dissolve at 12:01 a.m. on the second calendar day following the termination date. Victor Thorne was so focused on securing the space and launching the store that he barely glanced at the clause. He signed the sublease, and the deal was finalized. Over the next 12 years, that Michigan Avenue flagship became the absolute engine of Vanguard's growth. It wasn't just a store, it was our billboard. It drove $24 million in annual sales, which accounted for more than 28% of Vanguard's total corporate revenue. Every major investor we pitched was flown to Chicago, walked through those doors, and shown the bustling retail floor. I managed that property with extreme care, negotiating tax assessments, coordinating building maintenance, and keeping the relationship with Olivia Mercer flawless. For over a decade. The arrangement worked beautifully, but as Vanguard grew, so did Victor Thorne's ego. And when his son, Bradley Thorne, graduated from business school and joined the company, the writing on the wall began to appear. Bradley was a textbook case of nepotism, arrogant, entitled, and convinced that he was a corporate visionary. He was appointed vice president of operations, and he immediately set his eyes on my department. He wanted the prestige of managing Vanguard's high-value real estate portfolio, and his father was more than willing to hand it to him on a silver platter. They just needed a way to get me out of the picture without paying me what I was owed. By the time 2026 rolled around, the tension in the executive suite was thick. I had spent the last 2 years renegotiating leases for our suburban expansion, which had triggered a contractual performance bonus. According to my employment contract, I was owed a lump sum bonus of $320,000, calculated as 1.5% of the flagship's year-over-year sales growth. Victor and Bradley had no intention of paying that bonus. They saw an opportunity to cut corporate overhead, hand my job to Bradley, and pocket the savings. They thought they had the upper hand, forgetting the foundation upon which their empire's crown jewel was built. They didn't realize that by cutting my thread, they were releasing the heavy stone that kept their entire tent anchored to the ground. On Thursday morning, October 1st, 2026, I arrived at the office at my usual time of 7:30. The atmosphere in the hallway was cold. My assistant, who had worked with me for 5 years, wouldn't look me in the eye. She kept her head down, typing. That was the first sign. At exactly 9 a.m., I received a calendar invitation from Victor Thorne's executive assistant. The meeting was titled Real Estate Department Review. It was scheduled for 9:15 in the main boardroom. When I walked in, Victor was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table. His son, Bradley, was sitting to his right, spinning a sleek black stylus between his fingers and staring at a tablet. Standing near the window was the company's external legal counsel, Lawrence Cole. "Julian, take a seat," Victor said, his voice flat. He didn't offer his usual warm handshake. I sat down, placing my notebook on the table. "Good morning, Victor Bradley. Lawrence." Victor didn't waste time on pleasantries. He slid a thick blue folder across the table. "We're making some structural changes at Vanguard. The board has approved a consolidation plan. The real estate department is being merged with general operations to streamline our cost structure. As a result, your position as director of real estate is being eliminated, effective immediately." I looked at the folder, then at Victor. His expression was completely blank. I looked at Bradley, who had a smug, self-satisfied grin on his face. "Eliminated," I repeated slowly. "And who will be overseeing the portfolio?" "Bradley's team will absorb the leasing and property management duties," Victor replied. "We've built a strong foundation, Julian, but we need a modern, integrated approach to scaling our stores. Your manual, relationship-driven style is no longer aligned with our digital expansion strategy." I wanted to laugh. Relationship-driven style was their code word for the hard work of building trust with landlords, which was the only reason we had our stores in the first place. But I kept my face neutral. "And my outstanding performance bonus?" I asked, looking directly at Victor. "The 1.5% of the Michigan Avenue flagship's year-over-year growth. By my calculations, that's $320,000, based on the audited sales report from last month." Bradley spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. "Actually, Julian, since your role is being terminated due to redundancy, the bonus program is no longer applicable. Bonuses are paid to active employees at the end of the fiscal year. You won't be an active employee. We've drafted a severance agreement that we believe is very generous." I opened the folder. The agreement offered 4 weeks of base salary, which came out to $15,000. In exchange for this payment, I had to sign a comprehensive release waiver. The waiver was a legal trap. It stated that I would waive all current and future claims, including outstanding bonuses, salary disputes, and any rights related to the leases I had negotiated. 4 weeks of salary for 12 years of service, I said, looking at Victor. And I have to waive my contractual bonus of $320,000. It's standard corporate policy for redundancy. Lawrence Cole, the lawyer, chimed in. "We believe it's a fair offer to ensure a smooth transition. If you decline, you will still be terminated, but without the $15,000. You have until Friday at 5 p.m. to sign and return the agreement," Victor said, checking his watch. "Bradley will need your office keys and security credentials by the end of today." I looked at the document. I could feel the anger rising. But my years in commercial real estate had taught me one thing. Never show your hand when you're holding the winning cards. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought I would beg or threaten to sue them for the bonus, which would drag on in court for years and cost me tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. They had completely forgotten how the Chicago flagship lease was structured. Because they had operated it for 12 years, they viewed it as a permanent corporate asset. They didn't remember that Vanguard didn't own that lease. My private holding company did. I will take this document and review it with my counsel, I said, closing the folder. There's nothing to negotiate, Julian, Bradley said, leaning back in his chair. We've already transitioned the system access. Your corporate login was deactivated 10 minutes ago. We've got this under control. We don't need you anymore. I understand, I said calmly. I stood up, took my notebook, and picked up the blue folder. I will pack my personal belongings and leave. Good luck, Julian, Victor said, already looking down at his tablet, dismissing me like a minor annoyance. I walked back to my office. The glass walls of the corporate headquarters felt suffocating, but my mind was incredibly clear. I packed my grandfather's brass desk clock, my personal journals, and a few family photos into a single cardboard box. As I walked down the main corridor, I could see Bradley standing in the communal kitchen, laughing with two junior analysts. He raised his coffee mug to me in a mock toast. I didn't react. I kept my head high, walked out to the elevator, and descended to the parking garage. As I turned my car onto Wacker Drive, I called my personal attorney, a brilliant real estate litigator named Carlton Sharp. It was time to pull the plug. I met Carlton Sharp in his office overlooking Millennium Park. Carlton was 70, with sharp blue eyes and a career spent dissecting commercial real estate contracts. He had the original Vanguard sublease agreement from 2014 laid out on his desk. They really did it, didn't they? Carlton said, looking up over his reading glasses. They terminated you without cause, and they think they can walk away from your $320,000 bonus. They called it a consolidation, I said, sitting opposite him. They offered me $15,000 to sign away my rights. I have until Friday at 5 p.m. Carlton chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. Well, Julian, they just made the most expensive mistake in the history of their company. Let's look at Section 14.4 again. He tapped his index finger on the paper. The text was crystal clear. It stated, "The sublessee's right to occupy the premises located at 800 Michigan Avenue is strictly contingent upon Julian Vance maintaining active, full-time employment as Director of Real Estate. In the event that the sublessee terminates the employment of Julian Vance without documented cause, this sublease agreement shall automatically dissolve and terminate at 12:01 a.m. on the second calendar day following the date of such termination." Today is Thursday, October 1st. Carlton calculated, his eyes shining with anticipation. Your termination is effective today. That means the sublease automatically terminates at 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, October 3rd. As of that moment, Vanguard Retail Group has zero legal right to occupy that building. They are, under Illinois property law, holdover tenants in trespass. And the master lease, I asked. The master lease is between Chicago Landmark Properties and Vance Properties LLC, Carlton replied. It is fully active, and you are in perfect standing. You've paid the $80,000 for October already. You are the sole tenant of record. Vanguard is just a subtenant whose lease is about to turn into dust. I need to call Olivia Mercer, I said. I dialed Olivia's direct office line. When she answered, I explained the situation calmly, detail by detail. There was a long pause on the line. "Julian," Olivia said, her voice tight with anger, "we only approved Vanguard because of you. They are a nightmare to deal with on facility maintenance, and their financial reports are always late. If you are no longer managing that property, I don't want them in my building. You have my full backing. I will instruct our building operations manager and our on-site security to cooperate with whatever you need to do." "Thank you, Olivia," I said. "I'm going to enforce the lease termination. We'll be changing the locks early Saturday morning before the store opens." "Do it," Olivia said. "My team will ensure your locksmiths have full access. And Julian, don't let them take a single fixture that belongs to the building. Once we hung up, Carlton and I drafted the strategy. First, Carlton drafted a formal rejection of the severance package. I signed it with a steady hand. Next, he drafted the lease termination and eviction notice. The document was brutal. It notified Vanguard Retail Group that pursuant to Section 14.4 of the sublease agreement, their tenancy was terminated. Effective October 3rd at 12:01 a.m. It demanded that they vacate the premises and return all keys by that time. It also warned them that if they failed to vacate, they would be subject to Section 18.2 of the lease. Holdover damages calculated at triple the current rent, which amounted to $255,000 per month, plus $10,000 per day in liquidated damages for illegal occupancy. At 2 p.m. on Friday, October 2nd, Carlton's courier delivered the formal rejection and the eviction notice to Vanguard's corporate headquarters. At the same time, another courier delivered a copy to the store manager at the Michigan Avenue flagship. I knew exactly what Victor and Bradley would do. They would ignore it. They would assume it was a hollow legal threat, a desperate attempt by a fired employee to shake them down for his bonus. They didn't understand the speed of commercial eviction when a sublease automatically dissolves. They didn't realize that in Illinois, when a sublease terminates by its own terms due to a condition subsequent, no lengthy court eviction proceeding is required to lock out a subtenant. The master tenant simply resumes possession of their own lease space. On Friday afternoon, I hired Sentinel Security, a reputable commercial security firm. I contracted 4 off-duty officers to stand guard at the store starting at 6 a.m. on Saturday. I also scheduled a commercial locksmith company to arrive at 5:30 a.m. to drill and replace the commercial lock cylinders on all 3 entrance doors. Finally, I drafted a public notice to be printed on thick, heavy paper. It read, "Notice of possession. These premises have been reclaimed by the primary tenant, Vance Properties LLC. All unauthorized entry is strictly prohibited. For inquiries regarding property or access, contact Carlton Sharp, legal counsel." By Friday night, the pieces were set on the board. Victor and Bradley thought they were playing corporate chess, but they had left their king completely exposed on the Michigan Avenue storefront. I slept soundly that night, knowing that at midnight, the lease on Vanguard's crown jewel would vanish into thin air. Saturday morning, October 3rd, arrived with a gray, overcast sky and a biting wind. I pulled up to the Michigan Avenue flagship at 5:20 a.m. The street was quiet, empty except for a few early morning city buses. Waiting for me in the building lobby were the 2 locksmiths from the security contractor, along with Olivia Mercer's building operations manager, who was holding a set of master key cards. "Morning, Julian," the manager said, offering a thermos of coffee. Olivia briefed us. "Let's get this done quickly before the street gets busy." The locksmiths went to work immediately on the 3 double-glass entry doors. Using high-powered drills, they extracted the old cylinders and replaced them with high-security Medeco commercial lock cylinders, keys to which were only held by me and Carlton Sharp. By 6 a.m., the lock replacements were complete. The 4 Sentinel security guards arrived right on time, wearing black tactical uniforms and high-visibility vests. I stationed 2 at the main Michigan Avenue entrance and 2 at the rear loading dock. We taped the thick paper notice of possession to the center of the glass doors. At 8:30 a.m., the retail store manager, Sarah Miller, walked up the street. She was holding a tray of coffees for her team, hummed a tune, and reached into her bag for her keys. She stopped dead when she saw the security guards and the locked doors. "Can I help you?" one of the guards asked. "I'm the store manager," Sarah said, confused. "I need to open the store. Our shift starts in 30 minutes. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the guard replied, pointing to the notice. "These premises have been reclaimed by the primary tenant. No employee of Vanguard Retail Group is permitted entry." Sarah read the notice, her eyes widening. She immediately pulled out her phone and dialed. I watched from the corner coffee shop, sitting by the window, sipping a dark roast. It took exactly 20 minutes for Bradley Thorne to arrive. He parked his Porsche SUV illegally right in front of the store, slamming the door as he stepped out. He was wearing an expensive leather jacket and looked furious. "What is going on here?" Bradley shouted, marching up to the guards. "Who are you? Open these doors right now. I'm the VP of Operations for Vanguard. We own this store. We don't answer to Vanguard, the lead guard said calmly. You need to speak with Vance Properties. Vance, I spat. He turned and saw me walking out of the coffee shop. He stormed over, his face twisted in anger. Julian, what is this pathetic stunt? You're fired. You don't work here anymore. You can't just lock us out of our own store. This is a crime. I'm going to have you thrown in jail. I'm not working here, Bradley, I said, holding my coffee cup steady. I'm here as the managing member of Vance Properties, LLC. Your sublease terminated at midnight. Are you insane? Bradley screamed. That lease is a corporate asset. You can't just terminate it because you're throwing a tantrum over a bonus. We have our biggest launch of the season at 10 a.m. today. There are fashion bloggers and VIP clients flying in. We have 300 people showing up in an hour. Then you should have read your sublease agreement before you decided to consolidate my department, I said. At 9:15 a.m., a black Mercedes sedan pulled up behind Bradley's car. Victor Thorne stepped out. He was red-faced, his tie slightly askew. He was already screaming into his phone. He hung up and walked toward us, his chest puffed out. Julian, Victor roared. What is the meaning of this? I've already called the police. They're on their way. If you don't open these doors this second, I will personally sue you for every dollar you have. You're destroying this Your company destroyed my contract, Victor, I replied. Within 5 minutes, a Chicago police cruiser pulled up with its lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out. Victor immediately rushed over to them, gesturing wildly toward the doors and me. Officer, this man was fired on Thursday, Victor yelled. He's a disgruntled former employee who has locked us out of our retail business. He's trespassing and interfering with our commercial operations. We need you to break the locks and arrest him. The senior officer, a veteran cop with graying hair, walked over to me. Sir, do you have identification? Can you explain what's going on? Before I could speak, a taxi pulled up and Carlton Sharp stepped out carrying his leather briefcase. He walked over with a calm, commanding presence. Officer, my name is Carlton Sharp, representing Vance Properties, LLC, the primary tenant of this building, Carlton said, opening his briefcase. He handed the officer a folder of documents. These are the certified copies of the master lease between Chicago Landmark Properties and Vance Properties and the sublease agreement with Vanguard Retail Group. I draw your attention to Section 14.4. The officer took the papers and read through them, his brow furrowed. Carlton pointed out the key clauses in the termination letter signed by Victor Thorne on Thursday. As you can see, officer, Carlton explained, Vanguard's right to sublease was legally tied to Julian Vance's employment. When they fired him without cause, their sublease automatically dissolved 48 hours later. At midnight, they lost all legal tenancy. My client is the primary tenant, and he has simply resumed possession of his property. This is a civil landlord-tenant matter, and Vanguard is currently trespassing on my client's leased space. The officer looked at the documents, then at Victor and Bradley. Is it true you fired this man on Thursday? Yes, but that has nothing to do with the real estate, Victor stammered. The lease belongs to Vanguard. According to these documents, it doesn't, the officer said. Closing the folder, he turned to Victor. Sir, this is a civil property dispute. This man has the master lease and the property owner's approval to change the locks. We cannot arrest him, and we certainly cannot break the locks for you. If you attempt to force your way into this building, we will have to arrest you for criminal trespass and destruction of property. You can't be serious, Bradley shouted. Look at the sidewalk. The customers are already arriving. We're losing thousands of dollars every minute. The officer looked at Bradley coldly. I suggest you take this up with your lawyers, sir, but you need to clear the sidewalk. You cannot block the entrance. Victor stood frozen, his mouth open. Bradley looked like he was about to burst into tears. On the sidewalk, a queue of 60 fashion-conscious Chicagoans was starting to form, murmuring and taking photos of the police car and the locked doors. The crown jewel of Vanguard Retail Group was officially dark. The fallout from the lockout was immediate and catastrophic for Vanguard Retail Group. Because the Michigan Avenue flagship was closed all day Saturday and Sunday, the company lost an estimated $160,000 in direct weekend retail sales. But the financial loss was only the tip of the iceberg. Social media was flooded with photos of the locked storefront, the notice of possession taped to the glass, and the police car parked outside. Fashion bloggers who had been invited to the VIP launch posted videos explaining that the store was shut down due to a legal dispute. The public embarrassment was devastating. More importantly, Vanguard was in the middle of negotiating a major debt refinancing package with their primary lenders. The news of the flagship's sudden closure sent panic through the financial markets, threatening to derail their credit facilities. By Sunday afternoon, Vanguard's board of directors had seen enough. They called an emergency virtual board meeting, excluding Victor and Bradley Thorne. The board members, who owned significant shares in the company, demanded to know why our most profitable store had been closed by a landlord. When they discovered that Victor and Bradley had fired the director of real estate, who personally held the master lease, just to avoid paying a $320,000 bonus and to hand the job to Bradley, the board was furious. They realized that the CEO's personal greed and nepotism had put the entire $85 million company at risk of collapse. On Sunday evening, the board delivered an ultimatum to Victor Thorne. He was forced to resign as CEO, and Bradley was stripped of his title as VP of Operations, effective immediately. The board appointed Evelyn Pierce, a veteran director who had been with Vanguard for 8 years, as the interim chief executive officer. Evelyn Pierce wasted no time. At 8 p.m. on Sunday night, she called my attorney, Carlton Sharp. Her voice was strained, but she was professional. "Carlton, we need to resolve this tonight," Evelyn said. "The flagship store must open on Tuesday morning, or we risk defaulting on our covenant with our lenders." "What are Julian's terms?" Carlton, who was sitting in his study with a glass of scotch, smiled. "Julian's terms are simple, Evelyn. First, he wants his full, contractually earned performance bonus of $320,000 paid immediately by cashier's check. Second, he wants a severance package of $500,000, which is equivalent to 2 years of his base salary. Third, Vanguard must pay all legal fees incurred by Vance Properties LLC, which currently stand at $45,000. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "And the lease?" Evelyn asked. "We cannot operate without the store." "The old sublease is dead," Carlton replied. "If Vanguard wants to occupy the Michigan Avenue space, you will sign a new lease directly with Vance Properties LLC. The new rent is $120,000 per month, triple net. That's a $35,000 monthly increase, which aligns with current market rates for Michigan Avenue. If you refuse, Julian is prepared to lease the space to a major athletic brand that has already contacted him." The board spent 3 hours debating the terms. They tried to negotiate the rent down, but Carlton was unyielding. He knew Vanguard had zero leverage. Every day the store remained closed. Cost them $80,000 in sales and millions in brand equity. At midnight on Sunday, Evelyn Pierce signed the agreement on behalf of Vanguard Retail Group. On Monday morning, the cashier's checks were delivered to Carlton's office. I went to the bank and watched as the funds were deposited into my account. The $320,000 bonus and the $500,000 severance package cleared by Monday afternoon. On Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., I walked back to the Michigan Avenue flagship. The Sentinel security guards were still on duty. Sarah Miller, the store manager, was waiting on the sidewalk with her retail team, looking nervous. I walked up to her, took the new set of keys from my pocket, and handed them to her. "The store is yours, Sarah," I said with a smile. "You can open up." She looked at the keys, then at me, letting out a massive sigh of relief. "Thank you, Julian. I don't know what you did, but I'm glad it's over." "Me too," I said. As the retail staff rushed inside to turn on the lights and prepare the cash registers, I stood on the sidewalk and watched the store come back to life. Victor and Bradley Thorne were gone, their corporate careers in tatters. They had tried to steal my work and my bonus, believing their family name made them untouchable. In the end, their arrogance cost them everything. I walked back to my car, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. My holding company, Vance Properties LLC, was now earning an extra $35,000 a month in rent, which translates to $420,000 a year in pure passive income. backed by a corporate tenant that was now too terrified to ever cross me again. I had my bonus, I had my severance, and I had my freedom. As I drove along Lakeshore Drive, the sun finally broke through the Chicago clouds. I had built their foundation, and when they tried to push me off, I simply took the foundation with me.